obviously it is that NFL convention in a way, and so we saw a lot of people talk today, including the EVP of player personnel for your Dallas Cowboys. His name is Stephen Jones. He had a lot to say. Dan Quinn talked, obviously, as a head coach out there. I saw Dan Campbell.
Mike McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy did not. He is in the DFW. He is still here at home because, of course, he did not go out there. For a second there, I was wondering, or I was thinking, like, I'm not sure what made me uncomfortable about it, because I do know that not going out there, I don't think that matters as much for player evaluation. But I do wonder for, like, being around other folks in the league, having those conversations. But
probably so. But you know, with him, when he was at Green Bay, he never had anything to do with the draft. He just coached them up. In fact, he even said that when he got hired down here. So he was like surprised they wanted any of his input. So he's like, y'all got this.
Sure.
I'm going to come back here and try to think of some schemes for Dak Prescott.
Well, we know the man that does a lot of running stuff when it comes to the star. Stephen Jones does a lot. He impacts his team a lot. He's obviously the man in line once Jerry Jones is no longer the guy to be the guy. And with that being the case, it was kind of interesting hearing a lot of his comments out in Indy today. In fact, one of those directly it felt like conflicting with Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones knows how to keep it stirred up. He admittedly says that, and he said earlier in this offseason that this team would be all in, right? Those are the words that we have hung on to. And I know there was a lot of people immediately that were like, that don't mean nothing, Jerry be talking. Now, I understand that, but when it comes down to it, he says something, we have to take it with some level of realism, or I don't know, we have to take him at his word in some ways. Let's see how much that stands up. This is cut 11 here. This is Stephen Jones responding or talking about the notion of Jerry's all-in comments.
I've never known Jerry not to be all in any given year, but certainly, we've got a great team put together. I think the last 3 years won a lot of football games. I think 36, and certainly where we have to improve is the postseason. We're going to get the right kind of guys who step up and make big plays in the postseason. It's been a challenge in terms of our success there, and that's where we have to improve.
So yeah, that felt like it very immediately made cut any level of significance out of what I think a lot of people already looked at as a largely insignificant comment from Jerry Jones, but there was maybe this idea that possibly this meant that the Cowboys understood the severity of the situation, the severity of the ways in which the fan base felt, and maybe that they would shift up somehow the way that they go about some things this offseason. And felt like with Stephen Jones, that sounded very much status quo, like everything remains the same.
That's exactly what it was. He was telling y'all the truth, because here's the deal. He did not lie. If people think Jerry lies and Jerry says he's all in, he doesn't do anything. No, Jerry has always been all in. And then the last 15 years, Stephen said, no, you're not all in. We're not making them moves. Stephen has been the one that's conservative. Steve's the one that when Jerry wants to do something big, Stephen talks him out of it. The stories are, they're legendary. The biggest one of all was draft day, Johnny Manziel. Jerry wanted Johnny Manziel, and Stephen said, no, we're not. We ain't drafting no Johnny Manziel. We're going to take the best player on the board. His name is Zach Martin. And basically from that point on, Stephen has been the last one to decide what they do. Jerry gets the input. Jerry wants to do something. Jerry used to throw money at free agent backup offensive linemen like it was going out of style. It's like, they're backups, Jerry. But he was still throwing crazy money at him. Stephen said, we ain't doing that no more. In fact, D-Ware, we're not even going to keep you. We'll match it if it's decent. We'll let you. And then I'll be damned if the Denver Broncos didn't give him what he made the year before. And Stephen said, it's too steep for us. D-Ware, good look out there. Got him a Super Bowl ring. Yeah. So again, Jerry ain't lying when he says we're all in. That's the way he feels. Stephen always says, yeah, I got this.
Yeah, but ultimately,
hold my beer.
I think what we're talking about is maybe less about how the individual feels, but what the outcome ends up being, what it looks like.
Well, that's what I was saying in Crosstalk about how last year they shocked the world because Stephen has been notoriously conservative. We are a draft and development team. That's what they would say for years, and that's what Stephen would lean on, and it would drive me crazy because when you team build, and team building is a sport, you want to use everything in your bag. You want to use drafting. You want to use free agency. You want to use trades. You want to use all those things. But Stephen Jones said, nope, we're draft and develop. And then last year, they shockingly traded for Brandon Cooks. They shockingly signed free agent Stephon Gilmore. They shockingly, did some things that nobody expected them to do. I was like, wait a minute. What is going on with the Dallas Cowboys? And again, they did everything but make a trade at the trade deadline, which screwed it all up and made me realize they're not all in. That was last year.
Yeah. And just to be clear, they did also make a trade for Stephon Gilmore in that instance. But yeah, someone on the truckwreck.com text line from the 469 asked, do you think Stephen Jones possibly is telling the truth or is just trying to not show desperation so that any moves that they try and make, they don't overpay as much? And look,
both. Because it burned him with Zeke. With burning with Zeke, he's on at the combine, on the bus, and at that time, somebody asked Stephen, what are you going to pay Zeke? He said, are you going to give him a Todd Gurley kind of contract? And Stephen said, Todd Gurley is the floor.
Yeah.
And Rocky Arsenault, Zeke's agent, said, oh, we're going to hold you to that. So
bet. Right?
And if you don't believe us, we're taking Zeke's talents to Cabo. And that's what happened. And then the Cowboys capitulated and gave him the money.
Yeah, I think
Stephen had learned a lesson.
Well, you've got to hope so, because I think the hesitation, I know for me and I'm sure for a lot of people listening, is that, okay, that is a possibility technically, but I don't know how much that fits with the MO that's been established for this organization, especially with Stephen Jones, serving a large portion of the decision-making factor. How about this? Cut 9, see if this folds in at all, where he was talking about the idea of wanting contract extensions for Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, and Dak Prescott.
You get to do everything you want to do with the salary cap. I don't think any team does. But, we're certainly going to be able to, go out and go to work and get the things done that we feel like we need to get done to be successful.
Do you want to do those deals this offseason?
Yeah, we're not, like I said, won't expound on any details, timing, amounts, anything.
No, not timing, but you said you want to do deals about 3 of them.
I'm not going to say when.
So he tried to be a little cagey there and not giving a timeline. Does that give you a little bit more hope that maybe Stephen Jones has in fact learned his lesson all the way around on being a little too forthcoming in the media?
Again, Stephen Jones learned his lesson, and he's going to try to parse his words and play games and play touche. And you already said this last night. For those who missed it, Reg accurately described this time of the year as lion season. Because it is.
Yeah.
Jim Johnson used to say, people are playing poker. If you believe what they're saying right now about who they're going to draft, you're falling for it.
Okay. There's tons of things that were said during the course of this. Let's stick with some Stephen Jones. Seems like, tell me if there's anything to be read out of this, because it feels like all we're doing is like reading between the lines and trying to suss out what is meant. This is Stephen Jones talking about the idea of Leighton Vander Esch.
We'll just let Leighton will speak to that. It's certainly an injury issue with him. That he's getting his hands around, and let him speak to that.
Do you feel like there's any level of certainty there, or do you feel any better about the idea that Leighton Vander Esch returns? Because that felt to me very much like I don't know about that one. He might be letting us know that he's no longer playing football soon.
No, he's not going to be playing. If you remember the medical report, it doesn't seem like it's a damn shame. He's a talented player, but he had a history of getting injured, and this latest injury he had this season is career threatening. So I cannot imagine him coming back.
And so that would put even more of an onus on this team to be aggressive in the way that they add to that linebacker position, because it was clearly a need. Before he got hurt, really, they were adding to it, drafting DeMarvion Overshown out of Texas. But yeah, it's going to need to get even more. There's an increased need in that position, especially because he was pretty much a foundational piece when it came to the spine of your defense, having that linebacker there. And so you're definitely going to need to.
He was truly missed. In fact, that's when Dan Quinn started having the hybrid safety linebackers that were too small, and that's why running teams ran all over them.
Another one of those instances is defensive tackle, right? Like that's part of that spine in that defense, and you need the strength of defensive tackle. They invested very high capital with their first-round pick, taking Mazi Smith. Not an impressive first year for him. Not saying anything going further than that. However, Stephen Jones did try and speak about how the organization feels about Mazi Smith. This is Cut 7.
We have nothing but confidence in Mazi. I mean, I think it was a transition for him that he was trying to get his hands around, the technique and the way he played in Michigan versus what, Dan was trying to incorporate in his game. So I think Mazi can take a big jump in terms of this second year with him. He's got all the right skill sets, got all the right intangibles to go out there and get the job done. And we believe he's going to make a big jump here in the second year.
What we watched was on-the-job training. I actually like Mazi Smith. I have no idea how good he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be the greatest thing in the world. I just think that he did not know what he was doing in the NFL last year. We were watching on-the-job training. And again, I learned from, what was the wide receiver that was in the neutral zone for the Green and the Costa Cowboys, the Packers game, Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert was decent, but his rookie year, he didn't know what the hell he was doing. That was on-the-job training.
Yeah, I think the one thing that gets me thinking about it is the idea of how slow off the ball Mazi Smith has been, and that's been something that I know that Bobby Belt, Brian Broaddus, they do the Love of the Star podcast. Mm-hmm. You find that wherever you find your podcasts. But I was listening to one of their episodes recently, and they were talking about how it feels like a lot of these Michigan defensive linemen, it feels like maybe that's like a technique that's kind of taught is, being slower off the ball. I don't know exactly why that would be, maybe to avoid penalties or those types of things. But you've seen, it seems like of late, defensive linemen that come from Michigan being slow off of the football, off of the snap. And that's going to be something that I don't even know how long or if you can kind of train that out of him or what have you. But that needs to come around. And so I give him I'm obviously going to have to give him a little bit of grace in that regard, that is something that he came in with. It was very evident that he had that with him that he was working off of. But man, even the other things that you anticipate and you hope for out of defensive tackle did not really show up in that way. But I guess you have to trust in some way the traits that you saw in the team now that you have Zagnina. I forget the correct way to say Mike's name, the new defensive line coach, and obviously Mike Zimmer, and hope that those guys can help push him further towards. Of course, Greg Ellis absolutely is the assistant defensive line coach. Those guys can help push him towards being a productive defensive lineman for you. I imagine that you can't say anything other than we have a lot of belief in Mazi Smith at this point.
Incomplete. That's all. Like I said, you're watching on-job training, and I'm not calling him Taco Charleston. I'm not going to go there. A lot of people want to do that, jump to a conclusion. I'm going to say like this. He's got tremendous strength. It's almost Larry Allen-ish. That's all they've talked about. And for the position he plays, that's one of the things you need. His hesitation, there's a tendency, it seems, with those Michigan players, but also maybe it's just that he was just frozen trying to figure out what to do on the job training.
Maybe so. And so I think you continue to hope that it gets better for him, that he gets a better handle of how to be an NFL pro, because that's you draft a first round pick, you anticipate them being an everyday kind of contributor, or first immediate contributor in some ways. And it would be a problem if after a couple of years you're not getting real contribution from your first round pick. Real quick before we go, you mentioned Larry Allen, and that was a man whose name came up over the course of the conversation the media had with Stephen Jones at the Combine earlier today. I'm reading this from Michael Gelkin's Twitter, where he quoted Stephen Jones as saying, regarding the Tyler Smith, and if he preferred that he stayed at left guard rather. He said, quote, "That remains to be seen. It's starting to feel like Larry Allen all over again." He said. He went further to talk about how he can dominate that guard or tackle. Quote, "His versatility certainly brings options to the table in terms of how we look at this team moving forward." Close quote. And he clearly has been very good at left guard. It seemed like they drafted him to be the left tackle of the future. But if they feel so strongly about him left guard that they're gonna invoke Larry Allen, does that give you maybe some feeling that they're content with leaving him at left guard and just going and finding another left tackle for the future? Obviously, understanding that maybe they go with Tyron Smith this year or what have you.
What you do is you let Tyron Smith retire at some point. Now, I'm not saying this summer. I'm not talking about. In other words, you let Tyron play left guard, left tackle till he retires, and then at the same time you invest in a left tackle in the draft. You maybe and hope that guy turns out to be good, but you don't I wouldn't say spend a first round pick on a left tackle. because I don't think there's going to be one available that late in the draft.
Oh, it's a strong tackle draft.
Well, get him. And then what the thing is that what Steven is just saying is, I'm not going to slot him anywhere yet. And it might be a Larry Allen situation where, guess what? We found us a find at left guard. It's kind of like when they drafted Zach Martin. He could have said Zach Martin. Zach Martin was not a right guard when they drafted him.
Right.
So we can play that game over and over again.
Sure.
So I never, anytime you ask it's like an aha game. Anytime reporters try to nail somebody down and say, well, so is Tyler Smith going to be your left guard now? It's the spring. This is only his second year. We haven't even re-signed Tyron yet. It's all theoreticals at this point. But at the same time, you haven't even thought about, this is February. I saw somebody actually saying.
Well, you said they haven't thought about it. Stephen Jones makes it very clear that player acquisition is a 365-day-a-year job, doesn't he?
And the sun shines too every now and then. Again, these are all theoreticals right now because team building is a sport. There was a correspondent from Chicago warning about the future, who the Bears are going to pick with the first-round pick in February.
That's right.
Don't get me wrong. It could come down to the day of the draft before they decide what they're going to do. You follow what I'm saying?
Sure.
But in the meantime, and she was like, the clock is ticking. I'm like, it's February. It's only February. But people are like chomping at the bit.
Well,
and nothing means anything right now because what did you say last night?
It's line season.
Thank you.
It is line season, but you try and see if you can parse out a little bit of truth where you can. And that was our best effort to do that from some of the audio and some of the comments from EVP of player personnel for your Dallas Cowboys, Stephen Jones. Obviously, Mike McCarthy's not in Indy for the combine, but of course Stephen Jones is, and a contingent of Cowboys for to be at the combine, to evaluate talent, to do meetings, to talk around the league. Obviously, all of those things. And so, yeah, that's what's happening this week, and we'll try and stay on top of the best we can as your home of the Cowboys 105.3 The Fan.